Hello and welcome to another edition of Career Magic. My name is Nitin Kulkarni, and on this channel I talk about little things that can have a huge impact on our careers and on our lives. And today's topic is stress and resilience. In fact, I'm doing a three-part series on stress and resilience. When I started my career in the mid 1980s, we didn't really talk too much about stress or mental health for that matter. In fact, I lost my father when I was just 18 years old, and he was only 48 when he died of a sudden heart attack. The duration of the illness was just about 2-3 days, and at that time we just thought he had this problem with his heart, resulted in a heart attack, probably genetic, hereditary, but anyway, it was very unfortunate and we lost him. Today, however, I think that it might have been a stress-induced heart attack. Stress may have played a big part in what happened to my dad, his very, very untimely demise. And today, we talk about stress and mental health very differently. We talk about it quite a lot. It has become a big part of conversation around today's human beings, because stress is really causing havoc in terms of lifestyle diseases, premature deaths, and so on of individuals. So stress is a really important topic, and I'm going to talk about this in three parts. It's a three-part series. In the first part, called called "We Are Designed Wrong," I'm going to talk about how the human body responds to stress and how we are designed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our physiology, how we respond to stress, what happens inside us, and what has changed over the years, and why has it become such an acute problem nowadays. In the second part, I'm going to talk quite a bit about our stress response and how our stress response system within our bodies causes a lot of problems, causes a lot of disease, the way we experience stress nowadays. So what are those problems that it causes, what harmful diseases it can cause, etc. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. I'm going to get into a little bit of the physiology of our bodies in that episode, and I'm going to lean a little bit in that episode on this magnificent book called Why Zebras Don't Get Ulcers by Robert Sapolsky. Brilliant book. And I will lean a little bit on that book in the second part. And the third part, of course, is going to be about, so what do we do? How do we cope? How do we get out of this problem of today's stressors and the harmful effects that they cause? So that's the three-part series. So as I begin today's conversation around the design of the human body and what happens in case of stress, let me start with a deer. With a deer in a forest. Imagine a herd of deer in a forest. What do? They graze, they find food when they are hungry, they eat, they sleep, they procreate. Some of them get killed by predators, and those who survive live on and reproduce, create progeny, and this sort of cycle just keeps going on and on. Now, when you look at a deer in the forest, in this herd, stress for that deer actually is an acute physical crisis. So imagine the deer being chased by a tiger. Now that is acute physical distress, it's an acute physical emergency that the deer has to deal with, and the deer's body is beautifully evolved to deal with these sorts of emergencies. So that stress, that threat, causes the deer's body to do certain things, and let me just quickly describe what those certain things are. Those certain things that happen in the deer's body quickly enable it to get into a fight or flight, which is run mode, in order to escape the threat. And what happens in the deer's body? In the deer's body, at the base of the brain, there is a small structure called the hypothalamus. which triggers an alarm system in the body, which through nervous and hormonal signals causes the adrenal glands. The adrenal glands are two glands on top of the kidneys, causes the adrenal glands to secrete some hormones like cortisol and adrenaline, and these hormones create the effects in the body that enable the fight or flight response to take place. Now, what needs to happen in the body for this response to take place? Well, for starters, our legs, our arms, so in the case of a deer, the four legs need additional energy to be able to run or to be able to fight. So the body parts that need more energy, more blood supply gets directed towards these body parts and away from the body parts that no longer are very important in this sort of a response. So more sugar gets pumped into the bloodstream so that the cells have more energy, the muscles get more energy to fight or run. The blood pressure increases. Also, the digestive activity is reduced or stopped entirely. Reproductive activity is stopped because these activities are not very important right now. What's the point of digesting the food in my stomach or in an intestine if I am likely to become food for the predator? There is much more value in sending more energy and activating the organs that are going to help me fight or run away. So that's the response that takes place in the deer, and this response, the stress response of our bodies, is self-limiting. So after some time, the emergency or the threat or the stress is over. The deer either has escaped or has become food for the lion, has died. So it no longer needs, in either case, the stress response system. So the stress response system dials down the release of the hormones and stops that, which also causes the body to come back to normalcy. So this normal state is restored fairly quickly, and the stress response is there only for a short period of time. This normal state of the body, which you have normal temperature, blood pressure, blood sugar, and all of those parameters, is in biology termed homeostasis. So the idea is to restore homeostasis as quickly as possible so that the body can resume its normal functions. Now let's come back to the human beings. Now if you think about the human beings, our ancestors who lived many years ago in caves, and by the way, that was not so long ago in terms of evolutionary time that our ancestors lived in caves, and their body design, the structure of their body and how they function is not very different from how we function, and in fact it's very, very similar. So for our ancestors who lived in the caves, their situation was very similar to that of the deer. So for them, stress was really about acute physical emergencies, and the same identical stress response system. Deers are also mammals, so mammals have very, very similar, almost identical physiology, and so the same stress response system in our ancestors in the caves would get activated, and they would fight or run away, escape the threat, and fairly quickly homeostasis would be restored. So that's how it helped them survive. So this stress response system is really about survival. Now let's fast forward to today's human being. Now we live in a very different world today. For us, the stressors have changed dramatically. They are no longer about a tiger, getting accosted by a tiger on the road. Those are not the sorts of physical or stresses that we encounter today. They have changed. We worry more about the EMIs we have to pay. How am I going to be able to pay this EMI over the next 7 years? What is going to happen to my child's education? When do I get into a house that my classmate recently bought? I live in a small house. He's living in this big house. How do I catch up with him socially? Our stressors have become social and psychological. And these social and psychological stressors Unlike the physical stressors, which come and go away in a short period of time, they're over, they don't get over quickly. So these kinds of stresses can last for weeks, months, or years. Imagine having to deal with a nasty spouse or neighbor or manager. That stress can last for years. These kinds of stresses have the exact same, trigger the exact same stress response in our bodies, which is tailored for the fight or flight response. But in this case, we don't need the fight or flight response, but the same has been triggered, and it stays on for long periods of time, which is extremely harmful, because the stress response is designed to do something very quickly, survive, and then go on to normalcy. But if the stress response stays activated for long periods of time, the normal functioning of our body, our systems, is not restored. And that is what causes a lot of damage. In fact, as human beings, we go a step further. Not only does this get triggered by something that is happening to us socially, psychologically, but we even do it in anticipation. So I may not have lost my job, but I may have this feeling, this threat that I may lose it in the next 1 year, and that worry creates this stress response in our bodies. So in anticipation, not just when actual events take place on us, but in anticipation we activate this stress response system unknowingly, and it just keeps hurting. It hurts our body when it's kept on for long periods of time. So that is the fundamental problem we face, because the stressors have changed. Our stress response system is no longer designed to deal with these kinds of stressors, but that's how we are designed. So that's why I said in the title, we are designed wrong. So in the next episode, I will talk about what does this chronic stress response in our bodies do to our bodies. I'm going to talk about research that has happened over the last several years, several decades, and I'm going to talk about the specific, some broad specific items in which it causes harm in our bodies. And then eventually in episode 3, we will talk about how to deal with this, how to cope with this, how to build resilience and escape at least a bulk of the problems that this causes. So that was it for today. I will see you again on the next edition of Career Magic.